You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Welcome to Sustainably Geeky, episode 20. Today we're going to be talking about fast fashion, something that you may have heard a lot about, and we hope to kind of help you figure out what that means and for you as a consumer and for the environment. So we have a special guest today to talk about that, in addition to our regular cast, which is Jen and Chris. And then also Logan's joining us from Canada as well. So our guest today is Ashley Gill. Has been close to textiles all of her life. She grew up on a cotton farm in Texas and spent time in a cotton growing region of Cameroon during a stint with the Peace Corps. She's been with the Textile Exchange since 2010 and leads the standards team at Textile Exchange and is particularly passionate about ensuring that actions companies take to adopt sustainability result in real and meaningful change. Outside of work and travel, she takes her dog Tito on walks in the nearby nature preserve and tries to make her husband laugh. It sounds pretty cool. So Ashley,
sometimes successful, sometimes not.
You get the look of what?
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of tell us, I guess, why you decided to get in this field. I know you kind of grew up in the industry or near the industry, but what made you decide to make a living out of it? And
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, if you would have asked me whenever I was a kid if I was going to have anything to do with textiles or cotton, I would have said absolutely not. There's no way. I'm not interested. I spent a lot of time in the field as a child working, obviously during the summer. I didn't miss any school, but that was a big part of our life growing up. And then I went away to college. I had these kind of big city dreams. And I went away to school and really I took a lot of classes on history and also international development related to agriculture. And I started learning a lot more about, what farming actually, the potential that farming has to improve the lives of farmers. And so I spent some time in the Peace Corps. And while I was over there, my dad was actually diagnosed with cancer. And so I came home early to help take care, be with my family. My dad is doing great now. He's
awesome.
Been in remission for, almost 10 years. So really happy about that. But, I was at home and I was just thinking about the farm and thinking about the time that I had spent in Peace Corps and how much it opened my eyes about the impact that the decisions that we take have on the environment and the impact that then has on communities and the resiliency of communities. And, there's a lot of parallels you could draw between my family farm and the farms that I was visiting in Cameroon. But anyway, my mom, I was really interested in that and I wanted to find a job in that field, had no idea how to get into it. And my mom found an ad in a local newspaper for a global nonprofit in O'Donnell, Texas, which has a population of about 900 people.
Wow.
And I just didn't really believe her. I thought that there was something, they were probably lying. But anyway, it was an organization called Organic Exchange. And I started with them in 2010, and they evolved to become Textile Exchange. And I've been with them for almost 10 years now. In April will be 10 years.
How cool.
So
and how
it kind of opened my eyes to that whole world. I didn't really realize that it was there. But
how have you seen that company grow in that amount of time? It's been 10 years, and I imagine since they've changed their name, a lot of other things might have changed.
Yeah, the organization first started working on organic cotton. The founder worked with her husband. Her husband was an organic cotton farmer for many years, and he, really was focused on the farm, and she really went out and did a lot of the marketing. She was trying to find buyers for the organic cotton and really got to know companies like Nike and Patagonia, and were really kind of explaining and helping them understand the benefits of organic cotton. And then from that, the organization kind of evolved. But whenever I joined, we were still Organic Exchange, but we were transitioning into Textile Exchange. So it's been Textile Exchange most of my career. But I would say it's actually really incredible because we do a lot of work to help companies figure out what materials they should use and how to get those into their supply chain. And probably 10 years ago, we spent a lot of our time with the why. Like, why do you need to be using these materials? Why does it matter? Why should you be asking questions about where these materials come from? What are the impacts? And do you as a company really understand what those impacts are? And the transition that I've seen in the past 10 years is that people don't need the why anymore. There's so many brands and retailers that have strategies, that have, plans and targets in place, and they're coming to us more for how do I actually make this happen? I know that it's important. My consumers are asking for it. My buyers are asking for it. How do I actually make it happen? And so we've been able to transition into that, from that role of kind of, preaching and saying this is what you should be doing, more to that kind of hand holding and guidance role, which I absolutely love. It's really fun.
It's awesome. And it's really encouraging to, it's really encouraging to see a company like that, and that there's a need for it and demand for it as well. So before we get too far into the discussion, for our listeners out there, can you give kind of a recap of just what fast fashion is, for those who maybe only heard of it in passing or have never heard of it at all?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I would love to kind of spit off the history of fast fashion and how it started and all those things, but there's not, I'm not really sure about the details, but I can tell you that, a couple of generations ago, people would come out with new seasons maybe twice a year, maybe 4 times a year at the most, and where they would essentially like plan the cycle. A brand would plan a cycle that a year would have maybe 4 collections in it. So we would have the spring collection and the fall collection, or maybe spring, summer, fall, and winter. But what we have seen happen now is that the distance between kind of the number of collections that a brand puts out per year has increased like, quadruple what it used to be. So now, rather than having seasons and collections that come out once a season, now we have new stuff coming in every 2 weeks. In some cases every week. And it's a way to it's a way to bring consumers into the store more often. But the end result of that is that essentially there's just a lot more new things to buy. So that's happened. And the other thing that's kind of, happened in conjunction with that is that the prices per unit have fallen significantly. So a coat that you used to need to save up and buy, and you would only buy maybe once every 4 or 5 years, now, because a coat is so cheap relative to, to how much money people are making, they can buy a coat every year. They can buy a coat in the fall, and they can buy a coat in the spring if they like as well. Because the cost for an individual kind of item is just a lot cheaper. So this whole kind of shifting of the system really incentivizes people to buy more, and for the cost per unit to go down and down and down. And yeah, that's kind of the way I understand fast fashion. And there's still a ton of companies in that space. We work with companies that I would put in that space. It's definitely not, there's still companies that are big multinationals that don't do that, but that's kind of the definition.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that, fast fashion is just one symptom of this disposable society that has developed over the last several decades, right? Where it's become so cheap and easy to make, we tend to just use them a few times, once or twice, and throw them away. So I actually met you at the documentary screening for the documentary The Cost of Fast Fashion. The True Cost. Yeah. And it looked at a really in-depth, look at what fast fashion is, how clothes are produced. It gave some pretty touching stories about the people that work to make some of these clothes in other countries, and the things that people are doing to kind of fight this issue. And it was both, sad and hopeful at the same time. But I do think it's really opened my eyes to this issue that I already was kind of aware of, but it's obviously much bigger than even I knew. And curious, ladies, what do you think about all of this, and what's your experience, I guess, with the topic? Or did you come into this kind of knowing what it was, or are you kind of still learning like all of us about all of this?
I knew what fast fashion was, and it's super addictive because especially having a family of 4, buying a t-shirt that's $5 that the kid's going to grow out of in like 6 months is really alluring, as opposed to spending $25 on an organic t-shirt or something made sustainably that they're going to grow out of in 6 months, or sometimes less depending on the growth spurts. It's really hard to pass that up because children grow so fast, and then their stages grow so fast too, because my daughter Logan is 14 now, and there was a good chunk of time when she was little that pink and purple was sort of your jam.
Yeah.
Now not so much anymore, but it was only 4 years, and in that 4 years she grew a lot. So fashion for families, it's hard, and unless you have a really fantastic secondhand sound, or you have relatives that have older the nieces and nephews, hand-me-downs and secondhand isn't always an option either. So yeah. And then teaching this one about fast fashion, just because she's starting to get into it, and I know you discovered, as much as you like Hot Topic, what'd you find out about?
It is made of really cheap material.
Yeah.
And it goes really quickly.
Yeah.
I
Can I
think that
imagine-
was one of the questions that I had was quality of fabric. How do you know what to look for? What brands are good? Like, which ones are using organic cotton, I guess, or
Yeah. It's really hard. When I started thinking, and I have to say, I spend all day long talking to people who are like in the industry and familiar with supply chains. And so I'm going to have to catch myself so I don't use terms that only weird people know what they mean. But the thing that I think I always come back to is that the really secondhand is the best thing. It's great. Everybody, I think that's kind of pretty foundational. And it's really hard when you're in, I think one of the reasons that fast fashion is so widespread is because it is addicting, right? And it is where like the incentives are there to make things really cheap, and to keep the cost of things really, really low, and to keep people coming back. And you think about like how much the middle class has been squeezed in the last like decade or two, where you used to be able to plan to buy a house, and maybe that's not really that realistic for everyone anymore, but it is realistic to go shopping 2 or 3 times, even in a month, if you want to. And so it makes total sense. It's definitely kind of a psychology thing. And where I think the biggest impact of fast fashion is just the pressure that it puts on the system. And I know a lot about farming and about essentially, I think about materials come from 3 places. They're coming from farms, they're coming from forests, or they're coming from the oil and gas industry. So if it's synthetic, then it's like made out of oil, essentially. It goes through a lot of chemical processes. Farming is where like cotton and wool and a lot of the natural fibers come from, hemp, linen, all of those things. There's a lot of material coming out now that's called viscose or lyocell, that's made from harvested like eucalyptus trees or bamboo, and then it goes through a chemical process to turn into a fiber. And when you have like fast fashion and there's this huge kind of pressure on those resources, then it's really, really difficult to do it in a responsible way. So essentially if we can put less pressure on those systems, or maybe both, we can also incentivize better practices at that level. then that's really the best thing. And so for on the consumer side, for what people should look for, natural fiber is most likely going to last a little bit longer. Definitely there are cases where like nylon and polyester are produced in a way that's really technical and, good. But a couple of things you can do if you're looking at a garment, if there's a really, really a long list of materials in it, like there's a lot of things that have been blended, it's probably maybe one to try to avoid. So the less fibers there are in a specific material, the better, because that just means it's going to be easier to reprocess it. It's probably higher quality materials if there's more of it in a given garment. You can also try the seams. If you kind of pull on the seams in the store, that can also be a way if they look like there's big gaps or they're